Your fortune begins with you. My message this morning, in my message, I'm going to share some ideas about achievement, about success, about the spiritual life. And we're going to be exploring the idea of expanding our horizons and living outside the box that we often find ourselves in. In our generation, we have witnessed the end of circuses, where captive animals are forced to entertain us. And one of the most spectacular captive animals in the circus was the elephant. Have you all been to see the circus? Yeah, growing up, okay. And thought it was great fun then, but thinking about the animals and what they go through. So actually, I'm pleased to see that there is an end to circuses. And as I mentioned, one of the biggest, brightest, fun animals was the elephant. Okay. Children loved the elephants. But it was sad for them because it was also kind of, it was surprising, it was shocking, I guess the word is, to see an elephant as strong and as powerful as that animal is being bound by a thin rope around one of its legs. And when a trainer was asked, why is that so? Because that elephant certainly can break through and free itself from that bondage. The trainer responded that we begin with that same size rope that's around the adult elephant. And we begin when they are quite young, and that rope is able to control them and to hold them. And as they age, we use that same rope continually. And what happens is the elephant begins to believe that that rope is stronger than it is. And they do not try to break free. But I recall that there have been some elephants that break those chains and run rampant, okay? Trying to make for freedom. But there's something in us that feels that same way when we find ourselves being boxed in by life, by our situations. Like these circus elephants, how many of us are being held back by someone else's limited beliefs? Perhaps we have thought that we cannot have a certain kind of experience. We cannot have a certain kind of happiness or a peace of mind, certain loving relationships, needed healing, or some other form of good, because someone told us that we are unworthy, we are inadequate, and we believe them. We have believed that we are not enough. How many of us go through life hanging on to a belief that we cannot succeed at something that is important to us, something we desire to accomplish and achieve, simply because we tried and we failed once before? How many of us are being held back by old, outdated beliefs that no longer serve us? And what about those of us who are avoiding trying anything new because of some type of fear? Our freedom and our fortune begin with us. It has to do with what's going on in consciousness, in our mind. We are either minusing or plusing ourselves in our habitual way of thinking. In his book, Spiritual Economics, the late author and Unity minister Eric Butterworth explained it by saying, your personal welfare begins with your consciousness. It is not what happens on Wall Street. It's not the state of the economy, it's the state of your mind. You can be prosperous when business is poor, and you can be poor when businesses are booming. He explained that by our thinking, we're either adding to our good or we're taking away from it. Here's one way to look at it. He writes, failure or lack in our life is simply the result of continuously minusing ourselves. And success and prosperity are the results of constantly plussing ourselves. Isn't that an interesting idea? Minusing or plussing ourselves. And I can imagine that we've got this board, the chalkboard, and we're putting up, okay, I do this, and that's on the minus side. Okay, and I do this other thing, and that's a positive for me. That's uplifting, that's inspiring, okay? And when the minuses outweigh the pluses, we got trouble. There's trouble right here in River City. Minuses or negative thoughts like fear, like worry, like anxiety, like being critical and judgmental of ourselves and other people, well, these detract from our good. Our positive, optimistic, and supportive thoughts add to our good. Unity teaches us that whether we find treasures in life or trials, whether we find pearls or problems in our life, it has to do with our thoughts, our attitudes, and our beliefs, and the actions that we take based on our thoughts, attitudes, and belief. Now, before I go any further, I'd like to share a little puzzle with you and to see if you can solve it. In your program, you'll see a series of dots. There are two sets with 6 dots to them. Anyone know what I'm going to be asking you to do? Are you familiar with this puzzle? Good. All right. Now, the test is to see if you can draw 4 straight lines without taking your pen or pencil from the paper. Now, I have some pencils here for anyone who doesn't have one. Now, thank you. Okay, again, the rules are, you cannot, once you begin, you cannot lift that pencil off of that paper. And you can draw only 4 lines, and they have to pass through all of those dots. Okay?
All 6 or all 12 dots?
All 6.
Okay.
So we get 2 tries.
Yes, if you'd like. 9 dots. I'm thinking 6. Wait a minute, we're missing something here. 9 dots. Now, I'm going to share with you that 999 people out of 1,000 cannot do this within 15 minutes of time. 999 people out of 1,000 after 15 minutes feel frustrated, okay, because they cannot figure it out. And if you cannot figure it out, you might consider yourself boxed. Boxed in by limiting ways of thinking. This test is about going outside of the box. I'm going to give you a couple more minutes. I don't want you to feel frustrated. Anybody ready to cry uncle? Think about the idea of going outside limits. I'm giving you hints.
To go outside the box, but I still can't figure it out.
4 lines, 4 continuous lines. They have to be straight lines. Oh, straight lines. Okay.
Well, do it one line.
Oh. Okay. Here, oops, half of my picture is gone. Here I've numbered the boxes to help you figure out this puzzle, okay? Okay. Now, in the rules I gave you, nothing says that you have to stop. If you draw a line, if you begin and you draw a line straight through 1, 4, and 7, nothing in the rules say you have to stop at 7. If you continue down, make believe that there's a circle or a box for number 10 and draw that line. Now remember, you can't take your pen off of the paper when you get down there, okay? 1, 4, 7, and the make-believe 10. Now, you'll notice that the new 10, from there you can draw a straight line through 8 and through 6 and create another imaginary spot over here next to the 3. Okay, so we've got one straight line down through imaginary 10. Come up through the 8, through the 6, and the imaginary box here. Then once you're here, draw the third line over to the 3, to the 2, to the 1. Now it's simple, okay? The only 2 spots left are the 5 and the 9. And so you draw the fourth line straight through there. Okay, there, 4 straight lines through all of the circles or the boxes without lifting your pencil from the page. Now, thank you. Now, I imagine that you may be feeling okay about not being able to get this because I already set up some conditions for you. I said that 999 people out of 1,000 cannot do this. And I have already sent a message to you that you may have accepted that you are going to fail. And you may be feeling, well, that's okay. I'm with a crowd, okay? If they can't figure it out, there's no problem with me saying I can't figure it out. Now, the thing is here that you would be suffering from something called statistical hypnosis. And what that means is basically it's putting you to sleep. You're believing the statistic. Now, the truth is that you are not a statistic. And just because 999 people can't figure it out, that doesn't mean that you can't figure it out. It has to do with your consciousness, how you are thinking about yourself. When I first saw this, I could not figure it out either. But once I've done it, it seems easy and simple. So what this is telling us is that if we really want to get ahead in life and get out of the boxes that we place ourselves in life, we have to be willing to go beyond the traditional limits that others may be setting for us. You had to go beyond the 9 dots, okay? Go down to an imaginary 10 and come back up to an imaginary 1 to the right of the 3 in order to get your straight lines going. So how do we get outside the box once we realize that we are in a box and we're not experiencing the good that we would like to have in our lives? The good that God has for us and wants us to be able to share with our world. I'm going to share one of the teachings of Jesus and then 2 of Jesus' parables, and these are printed in your program. I'm going to begin with Matthew 13:12, and I believe that these three together show a three-part progression spiritually that I believe can open us up to getting out of the box. Matthew 13:12 reads, "Whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. And whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them." Now, this passage is a curious one. Jesus was out on the mountainside. Well, actually, he went out, and there was such a large group of people that he got into a boat. And he taught the people who were on the hillside, the mountainside, from where he was in the boat. And just before this passage, he gives them or shares with them the parable of the talents. That's where a master is leaving town, and he calls his three servants to him, and he gives them each a certain amount of talents. Now, it doesn't define what talents are, but to one, he gives 10 talents. To the next one, he gives 5. And to the last one, he gives just 1 talent. And these are according to their ability. And he wants them to use these talents. And he goes away, and after a certain amount of time, he comes back. And what he has found coming back is that the one who had 10 talents has 10 more. And the one who has 5, who was given 5, has another 5. But the one who was just given 1 talent was afraid of losing that talent. And so he buried it in the field. And he brought the talent to return it to the master. And this master was very, very pleased with the first 2 servants. Okay. And he was highly upset at this person right here. And he said, that's when he said this, "For those who have, more will be given." And he shared with them additional blessings. But this one here, who buried his talent and was returning only the 1, he said, "Let the one that he has be taken from him." And years ago, when I encountered this particular scripture, I just thought, if this is God, and this is an example of how God treats us, this is bad. This is awful. This is one of those vengeful, angry Old Testament gods. And I did not want to believe in that kind of God. I didn't believe that Jesus taught that either, but this was a curious thing here, okay? Because in addition to taking the 1 talent that he had, he said, throw the bum out. Okay, so he lost his job too. And I thought, this cannot be about God. This is not right. And I understand from Unity's perspective, when we study the Bible metaphysically, we don't see that these are individual people outside of us. We see people, what they say, what they do, stories. They are all about us. They're all about some aspect in our consciousness. And in this way, everything in the Bible is about you. Everything in the Bible is about me, if we look at it and study it metaphysically. And so, what does this story have to tell us? Basically, again, it's about consciousness. So, what Jesus is telling the people is that if we have a consciousness of prosperity, we experience prosperity. If we have a consciousness of lack and limitation, we experience lack and limitation. To those who have the expectation of good in their lives, they experience what they expect. And to those who do not have an expectation of good, they experience what they expect. So, to him who has a consciousness of good, of prosperity, and focuses on these things, that person experiences those kinds of experiences. Now, that doesn't mean that that person doesn't have any problems, but it means that they can see things differently, and they can get past the appearance of things to know that there is healing that there is prosperity, that there is peace, even while on the outside there seems to be a storm. And those who have a prosperity of lack, they experience prosperity of lack. So whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. And whoever does not have, even what they have, will be taken from them. Now, it's not that God takes it from us. It's that by limiting ourselves, by placing ourselves in the box, I cannot, we close the door to this treasure. Because Jesus said, it's Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. So, if we don't have it, what might we be doing that is closing the door to our harmonious relationships, the peace of mind that we want, the financial support that we are looking for? So this is one stage. And when we're in this stage here, at some point we begin asking ourselves, well, there's got to be more to life. There's got to be joy in life. There's got to be a source for peace of mind. And we start a journey of discovery, a journey of realization. Just who are we, okay? And what does it mean when we understand that we are children of God, expressors of God, expressions of God? What does it mean that we are given the kingdom? So I would suggest that this passage really isn't about God punishing us when we disappoint God, when we disappoint ourselves. When we disappoint ourselves, we unconsciously perhaps close the door to our good. And so in this sense, it's taken from us. Because even if God was right there and said, here, I'm going to give you this peace of mind. When we're locked into this kind of lack and limitation kind of thing, and I'm not enough, we won't see that gift. We won't accept that gift. We keep it from us. So, we want to move from there. And where do we go? We move to the next step. Okay? And I think that is illustrated by the next, the parable of the hidden treasure. Matthew 13:44. The kingdom of heaven, Jesus said, is like treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again, and then in his joy, he went and sold all that he had and he bought that field. Well, what's happening here? This one is very similar to the next one, but there are some differences. In this parable about the hidden treasure, the field is our life experience, and we are this man. We are all seekers, and the field is our life experience. We are all seeking something more. We're all seeking greater love, compassion, kindness. We're seeking what brings us peace and what brings us joy in life. We're seeking this in our field of experiences. And we learn and grow through our life experiences, moving through different stages of spiritual growth. And at first, we are spiritually young, spiritually immature, and we search for this joy, this peace, in cars, in money, in houses, in a big bank account. In other words, the riches of the world. And then, after a bit of conscious living, we move to a kind of spiritual adolescence. And we begin to ask, is there more than accumulating things in life? And we begin to seek this more. And we move to the next level of spiritual growth, which I believe is illustrated by the second parable, the parable of the pearl of great price. And that reads, again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. When he found one of great value, he went away and he sold everything that he had in order to buy it. This parable speaks about this next stage in our spiritual growth. We can think of this as something that follows from the parable of the man and the treasure in the field. Now we are a merchant. We have learned a lot. We have found treasures. We have found pearls, okay? But we are still looking for that pearl which is greater. That pearl of greater understanding. And we take hold of this new level of spiritual awareness through our spiritual exercises, prayer, meditation, contemplation, and service. And as we do, we become more and more willing to give up those things that we used to hold dear in the past. We're willing to go and sell what we have, to release, to let go what we used to believe, what we used to think, old attitudes and beliefs that blocked the light in us, in order that we might open ourselves to what Jesus called the new birth, transformation. Exploring who we are, what our relationship to others and to God is, we move into deeper levels of understanding. And then one day, we get a taste of some spiritual experience, even more grand. Just a taste, and we awaken to the realization that what we seek is not things, but the source of all things. Some call it God, some call it higher power, oneness, non-dual reality, cosmic consciousness, the higher self, the true self. Jesus called it Father. Natural pearls form or are created when an irritant, which is usually a parasite, enters the shell of an oyster, a mussel, or a clam. And as a defense mechanism, a fluid is used to coat that irritant, layer upon layer of this coating called NaCre, nacre. And this is deposited around this irritant until a lustrous pearl is formed. Now, in this stage, we make a tremendous discovery. We realize that we are relating to life and all of its problems and difficulties in a new way, in a different way. Things which bothered us in the past, things which frightened us in the past, or which caused us to be angry, to feel intolerant. Now, there's a change happening. We know how we can change these into blessings. Like the clam, the oyster, and the mussel, when challenging situations threaten us, we are learning how to surround that situation with love, how to surround that situation with compassion, with forgiveness, and how to move past it to find peace, which is always present. Just like the clam, the oyster, and the mussel, we are learning to change that challenging situation into a pearl. Slowly but surely, we realize the truth that our fortune, our success, spiritually begins with us and what we are doing with our consciousness. God bless you.